I always knew I wasn't the favorite child, but I didn't realize how disposable I truly was until the day my dad called me, voice cold, controlled, and dripping with the kind of entitlement only a parent with a golden child can possess. It was early morning. I was half asleep in my tiny off-campus apartment, juggling 2 part-time jobs, finals, and the pressure of being the only one in the family who didn't crumble under expectations. The phone buzzed, and the first thing I heard wasn't a greeting. It wasn't concern. It wasn't even fake affection. It was, "You will be at your sister's wedding." I'm not asking. He didn't even pause before dropping the real threat: "If you don't show up, your tuition stops." Immediately. Just like that. Years of honor roll work, scholarships I almost got but barely missed, sleepless nights, emotional breakdowns behind closed doors, and suddenly all of it hung on whether I was willing to stand in a room filled with relatives who treated me like an afterthought. Dad didn't know I was already past the point where his threats mattered. He didn't know I had graduated early. He didn't know I walked that stage in silence months ago. And he definitely didn't know I had already accepted a 6-figure offer while he was still telling people I was barely passing. But that morning, as he barked orders like I was property, something inside me snapped, not loudly, but cleanly. The kind of snap that comes after years of being ignored, belittled, overshadowed. The kind of snap that happens when someone finally realizes they were never loved for who they were, only for the control they provided. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't even correct him. I let him think he still held power over me, because for the first time in my life, I knew something he didn't. He couldn't hurt me anymore. I didn't answer my dad right away after that call. I let his words sit there, like a bad smell lingering in a closed room, because that's what he expected: silence, obedience, guilt. Growing up, that was the pattern. He spoke, I obeyed. My sister breathed, and the world applauded. She got cars, parties, designer dresses, and praise for simply existing. I got lectures about working harder, even when I was already doing everything alone. So when he threatened my tuition, he thought it would crush me. He thought I'd panic, apologize, and promise to be at that wedding with a smile on my face, ready to clap for the same sister who used to tell everyone I was the family embarrassment. Instead, I sat there staring at the wall, replaying every moment that led to this, every time my achievements were ignored, every time my sister took credit for something I did, every time my dad told me I should be more like her. And all the while he had no idea I was already done with school. No idea that while they spent money on her grand engagement party, I was filing paperwork, finishing extra credits, and walking across a stage alone because I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing I succeeded without their help. He didn't know I was already living off my own income, not his. He didn't know the tuition threats were meaningless. But what he did know, what he counted on, was that deep down, I still cared. That some part of me still wanted to be included, wanted a seat at the table. And the worst part? A tiny, stupid part of me actually did. Not for them, for the version of family I used to wish I had. The version where parents were proud, siblings supported each other, and showing up to a wedding meant celebrating, not being paraded around as the lesser child. But that version never existed, and I was tired of pretending it did. So instead of calling him back, I let my phone ring again and again as he tried to remind me of my place. I could practically hear him winding up another threat through the voicemail. If only he knew the truth, that the only thing he had left to take from me was his presence, and losing that felt more like freedom than punishment. By the third day, the call stopped, but not because my dad calmed down. No, he just changed tactics. That's how my family works. When intimidation doesn't get them what they want, they switch to guilt. When guilt fails, they shift to humiliation. And when humiliation stops working, they go for public displays, because nothing fuels them like the performance of being good parents. So when I woke up to 33 unread messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, I knew exactly what happened. My dad had made me the villain of the week. Suddenly everyone had something to say. Why are you being difficult? It's your sister's big day. Family comes first. You've always had an attitude problem. You should be grateful your father is paying for your education. I scrolled through each message slowly, almost amused, because not a single one of them knew the truth. Not a single one knew that I stood on a graduation stage months ago. Not a single one knew that my first paycheck was bigger than what my father made in 2 months. Not a single one knew I was already interviewing for promotions while they still imagined me drowning in homework. But what annoyed me wasn't the lies, it was the assumption. The entitlement. These people, who never called to check on me, never offered a word of encouragement, never even bothered to ask how I was doing, suddenly felt they had the right to demand my presence. All because the golden child wanted her perfect wedding audience. And then, buried in the messages, was one from my sister herself. It was short, sharp, and exactly what I expected. Don't ruin this for me like you ruin everything. No hello. No question. No acknowledgement that we share blood. Just another reminder of how easily she weaponized the narrative against me. For a moment, I felt that familiar sting, the one that comes from being blamed for things you never did. But it faded quicker than ever before. Because this time, I had leverage. Not revenge, not anger, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that for the first time in my life, they needed me more than I needed them. And they had no clue that the person they were trying to control had already slipped out of their grasp months ago. The pressure didn't stop there. Of course it didn't. Because in my family, nothing is ever about love, it's about image. And a wedding, especially my sister's, was their Super Bowl. My absence would be a scandal, a stain, a tiny crack in the perfect picture they wanted to paint for guests who barely cared. So when guilt texts didn't work and insults didn't work, my mom finally tried the soft approach, which honestly felt worse. She called me late at night, her voice trembling in a way she probably practiced in front of a mirror. "Sweetheart, why are you doing this?" she whispered, like I was the one causing chaos. "Your sister just wants you there. Your dad is under so much stress. Can't you just compromise? For the family?" It was almost impressive how she made it sound like my absence was the downfall of our entire bloodline. Not once did she ask if I was okay. Not once did she ask how school was, how work was, how I was surviving on my OWN.NO. My worth only existed in how I could contribute to their image. I listened quietly, letting her perform her emotional gymnastics, because something in me wanted to see how far they'd go, how desperate they'd get. And then she said it, the thing that turned my silence into stone. "You know your father works so hard to pay for your tuition. He sacrifices so much. The least you can do is be supportive at your sister's wedding." I almost laughed. Really, I did. Because the truth none of them knew, was that I hadn't taken a cent from my father in almost a year. The scholarships I secured, the early graduation, the internship turned job, the careful budgeting, they weren't flukes. They were the result of me clawing my way out of the shadow they kept me in. But I didn't say that. I wanted them to feel the shock later, when it mattered. Still, something about hearing my mom weaponize sacrifice made something ugly twist inside me. It reminded me of every time they called me dramatic, lazy, ungrateful, even as I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. It reminded me that in their eyes, my role in the family wasn't to succeed. It was to make them look good while my sister shined. So I finally answered her question, but not in the way she wanted. "I'm busy," I said flatly. "I already have commitments that weekend." The silence on the other end wasn't confusion, it was disbelief that I wasn't folding. That I wasn't begging. That I wasn't crying. For the first time in my life, they were learning what it felt like when I didn't make their convenience my responsibility. The week of the wedding crept closer, and with every day that passed, my family's tone shifted from righteous fury to pure panic. The texts slowed. The calls turned into voicemails. The guilt trips became shorter, sharper, almost desperate. They were running out of time, and they knew it. But I had already made my decision. Silence was my answer, distance was my boundary, and the truth I held was the knife that would eventually cut the final thread of control they thought they still had over me. I spent those days focusing on myself, on work, on the life I was quietly building while they scrambled to keep their perfect facade intact. My boss had just confirmed my promotion, something I had worked for in secrecy, grinding late into the night, learning skills nobody in my family would ever believe I was capable of mastering. I was preparing to move to a better apartment, one where the walls weren't thin and the heater actually worked. I was building a life entirely separate from the one that tried to suffocate me. And on the morning before the wedding, just as I was packing some files and checking emails, my phone buzzed again. Not my mom. Not my dad. Not even my sister. It was my cousin, someone who, unlike the rest, never played the favoritism game. Someone who saw everything growing up, the cruelty, the double standards, the way I was always pushed aside. She never interfered, but she always knew. Her message was short at first. Are you really not coming? I hesitated before answering, but she quickly followed up with, good. That stopped me. Then another message came in, longer this time. They're losing their minds over you. Your dad is yelling at everyone. Your mom is crying in the hallway. Your sister is throwing tantrums because she says her photos will look incomplete without a full family. They're acting like your existence is a prop. I stared at the screen, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief wash over me. Sadness for the child I used to be, the one who would have begged for inclusion. Relief for the person I was now, the one who finally recognized their manipulation for what it was. Then my cousin sent a final text. One sentence. One truth that cut deeper than anything my parents had said. They don't miss you. They miss the control. And just like that, everything became crystal clear. Their anger wasn't about family. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about tradition. It was about losing their ability to use me as a piece in their perfect image. For the first time, I felt genuinely free, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a quiet, grounded way. The kind of freedom that comes from finally understanding that you don't owe people access to you just because you share blood. And as my cousin ended with, do what's best for you, I realized. I already was. The morning of the wedding arrived with a kind of stillness I wasn't expecting. No anxiety. No guilt clawing at my throat. No urge to check my phone every few minutes. Just peace. A quiet kind of peace that felt foreign but welcome. While my family was probably scrambling around in coordinated colors, barking orders, and rehearsing fake smiles for photos, I was sitting at my small kitchen table, sipping coffee, reviewing onboarding paperwork for my new role. It felt surreal, how completely separate my world had become from theirs. How the life I built was running smoother without their noise in it. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. But this time it didn't stop. It vibrated, paused, vibrated again, like a siren warning me of incoming chaos. I ignored the first few notifications, assuming they were more guilt trips. But when the buzzing wouldn't stop, I finally glanced at the screen. 25 missed calls. 15 voicemails. Dozens of texts. Something had happened. A part of me, the old part, the trained, obedient part, felt that little tug of panic. But the new me knew better. Still, curiosity got the best of me when a message from my cousin came in. Oh my God. Call me when you can. No explanation. No context. Just urgency. I called her, and she picked up so quickly it was like she had the phone in her hand waiting. They found out, she said breathlessly. For a second, I didn't even understand. Found out what? And then she said the words that made my stomach tighten, not with fear, but with anticipation. They know you graduated. They know you have a job. They know you don't need them anymore. Apparently, one of the wedding guests, an old professor of mine, had recognized my name while talking about recent graduates. He'd casually mentioned how proud he was that I finished early, how he heard I landed a major position at a top company. And just like that, the image collapsed. My dad froze mid-conversation. My mom almost dropped her purse. My sister stopped complaining long enough to listen. They stood there stunned, embarrassed, exposed, not because I succeeded, but because I succeeded without them. Without permission. Without dependence. My cousin whispered through the phone, "Your dad looks like he swallowed a brick. Your mom is pretending she already knew, but everyone can see the cracks." I didn't speak. I didn't laugh. I didn't say good. Instead, I just listened as my cousin continued. "Your sister is furious. She said your success is attention-seeking. She's blaming you for ruining her day even though you're not even here." The absurdity of it all almost made me smile. Even my success, quiet, personal, hard-earned, somehow threatened her spotlight. My cousin lowered her voice. "Your dad is saying he'll deal with you after the wedding." That old familiar phrase. The one he used whenever he felt powerful. But this time, it felt different. This time, it didn't scare me. Because the truth was simple, there was nothing left for him to deal with. He had no leverage. No tuition. No authority. No control. My cousin exhaled shakily. Honestly, I've never seen them this panicked. They thought they owned you. I looked around my tiny apartment, my coffee cup, my laptop, my job offer letter on the table, and for the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of something I had never known before. Independence. Real independence. Not rebellion. Not spite. Not running away. Just freedom. And while my family was unraveling at a wedding I never wanted to be part of, I realized something even more important. I didn't need to go back. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever, unless I chose to. Their panic wasn't my responsibility. Their humiliation wasn't my burden. Their reaction wasn't my problem. I finally understood. My life was mine, and they were finally seeing it too. I thought that would be the end of it, my family stewing in their shock while I kept living my life, but the universe wasn't done yet. Because just as the wedding ceremony was about to begin, just as the guests were standing and the music was starting, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't expected at all. Not my dad. Not my mom. Not even my sister. It was my grandmother. The one person in the family who had always seen the truth, even when she didn't speak it. The one who used to slip me extra food when my parents forgot I didn't eat at the party. The one who told me quietly, "You're stronger than they think," whenever I felt small. She rarely called, and almost never during big events, which told me everything. I picked up. Her voice was different, tired, disappointed, almost shaking with the frustration she'd been holding in for years. "Sweetheart, what did you do?" For a moment I was confused, until she continued. "Everyone here looks like they've seen a ghost. Your father is pacing. Your mother is pretending nothing is wrong. Your sister is screaming in the bridal suite. What happened?" I explained everything simply, that I finished school early, that I had a job, that I didn't need tuition, that I chose not to come because I was tired of being treated like furniture. She didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. She didn't scold me. When I finished, she let out a long sigh. "So that's why they're panicking," she murmured. "They thought they had you chained to them with money." Her voice hardened, something I rarely heard from her. "Let me tell you something, child. They aren't upset because you succeeded. They're upset because you succeeded without them. You broke the story they created." I felt my throat tighten a little, not because her words hurt, but because they were the first honest ones I had heard from family in years. Then her tone shifted into something sharper. "Your sister is blaming you for ruining her wedding day. Your father is blaming me for not telling him. Your mother is crying like a victim. It's all a show. Typical. Predictable. Exhausting." "Are you safe?" she asked softly. That question, it hit harder than anything my parents ever said. Because she didn't ask if I was sorry. She didn't ask if I regretted anything. She didn't ask why I didn't come. She asked if I was safe. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I realized no one in my immediate family had asked me that in years. Maybe ever. I told her I was okay. Really okay. Better than I had been in a long time. She exhaled with relief. "Good," she said. "You deserve to be happy, even if they can't accept it." But then she added something that made my chest freeze for a second. "Your father is planning to come see you after the wedding. He's furious. He thinks he can still intimidate you." I felt that familiar flicker of fear, the old instinct, the old conditioning, but it disappeared almost as quickly as it came. I wasn't the same student depending on his money. I wasn't the same child who bent to his every demand. "Let him come," I said quietly. "I don't owe him anything anymore." My grandmother didn't argue. She only said, "If he raises his voice at you, call me." It was such a small sentence, but it meant more than anything my parents had ever offered. When we hung up, I sat back on my chair, letting everything wash over me. The chaos at the wedding. The cracks in their perfect image. The truth spreading through the guests like wildfire. The panic. The shock. The unraveling. And me, sitting alone in my quiet apartment, untouched by all of it. For the first time in my life, the storm was happening over there, and I was finally standing somewhere the lightning couldn't reach. The control they thought they had? Gone. The fear they used to weaponize? Gone. The version of me they expected to show up and play along? Gone. They wanted an obedient child. What they got was an adult who didn't need them, and that was their real nightmare. My dad showed up at my apartment the next morning, still wearing the suit from the wedding, tie crooked, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Not a knock. Not a text. Just a loud, angry pounding on my door like he owned the building, like he owned me. For a moment, I just stood there, watching the handle rattle as he tried to force his authority through cheap metal. The old version of me, the conditioned, fearful one, would have opened the door immediately, apologized, and braced for the storm. But the person I'd become didn't move until I was ready. When I finally opened the door, I didn't step aside. I didn't greet him. I didn't bow my head. I stood tall, blocking the entrance, calm in a way that clearly enraged him more than any argument ever could. He stared at me like I had personally betrayed him, not just by skipping the wedding, but by daring to evolve into someone outside his control. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he spat. "Embarrassing this family? Making a fool out of us? You think you're better than everyone now, is that it?" His voice was loud enough that a few neighbors peeked through peepholes. He noticed, and that only made him more furious. My dad hates two things, losing control and losing an audience. He stepped closer. "And what's this I hear about you graduating? And some job? You hid that from us?" His tone wasn't disbelief, it was entitlement. As if my accomplishments were his property. As if my future required his permission. I didn't flinch. "I didn't hide anything," I said. "You just never asked." That hit harder than any insult. He froze, stunned, not because he disagreed, but because he knew it was the truth. For years, he'd been so focused on polishing the golden child, he forgot I existed unless he needed someone to blame or control. And now? That afterthought had outgrown him. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he snapped, voice rising again. "After everything I've done for you? After all the money, what money?" I interrupted quietly. "You haven't paid a single cent of my tuition in almost a year. I finished school on my own. I pay my own bills, I have my own income. You didn't make me. You didn't build this." He blinked. Once. Twice. His mouth opened but no sound came out. He had nothing to throw at me, not guilt, not threats, not leverage. His entire arsenal was empty. He stepped back as if the hallway had tilted. You think you don't need us anymore?" he whispered, trying one last emotional look. "No," I said. "I know I don't." The quietness of that line hurt him more than a scream ever could. He looked around, like he was searching for the version of me he remembered, the scared, obedient kid who shook whenever he raised his voice. That kid was gone, buried under years of exhaustion and independence. And what he saw standing in front of him was someone he couldn't manipulate anymore. "Your mother is devastated," he tried next. My sister has hated me since we were children," I said. "And Mom is upset because her perfect picture cracked. I'm not responsible for fixing that." He swallowed hard. For the first time in my life, I saw something in his face I never expected. Fear. Not of me, but of losing the narrative he built. Losing the control. Losing the easy scapegoat. "I raised you," he snapped weakly. "You owe me respect." "Respect is mutual," I replied. "Obedience isn't respect." He didn't know how to respond. He just stood there, chest rising and falling, replacing anger with confusion, confusion with wounded pride. And then he said the final thing he thought would break me, the old, familiar ultimatum: "If you walk away from this family, don't expect us to come chasing after you." I looked him dead in the eye. "You're not losing me," I said. "You already did." For a moment, the hallway was silent. Completely silent. And then he turned around and walked away, slowly, stiffly, like someone who had just realized the leash he'd been holding for years wasn't attached to anything anymore. I closed the door gently. Not with triumph. Not with anger. Just closure. Pure, clean closure. And as I leaned back against the door, taking in the soft quiet of my apartment, the home I paid for, built for myself, I felt something settle deep inside me. A final truth: I didn't need them. I never truly did. And now? They finally knew it too. That was the ending I didn't know I needed. Not a reunion. Not forgiveness. Not a dramatic fight. Just this, freedom, with no strings attached.